All right, folks, we got postseason football coming your way very soon. We're just about 2 days away from bowl play, and this is Big 12 Breakdown right here on Wednesday night, each and every one of them with the best bloggers in the conference. This week we've got Hunter Cook from Viva the Matador, also Matt Hofeld with Bragging Rights with Crimson and Cream Machine from SB Nation, and also Sean Cordy from Today's You to help us break down Baylor and the entire conference. So we're in pretty good shape here because Baylor and Texas Tech played two of the more recent games that are coming up soon, and of course Oklahoma playing in that mighty important matchup against Clemson. So let's start right there, Matt, with you and the Clemson Tigers in the Orange Bowl. But before that, it was only about 2 years ago, less than, that we were singing the praises of Trevor Knight coming off that Sugar Bowl win in New Orleans against Alabama, and a lot can change in a fairly short period of time.
Yeah, a whole lot can change. Last week it was announced that Trevor Knight would be seeking a transfer. Bob Stoops gives him a full release to transfer to wherever he wants to. Knight will graduate Oklahoma in the spring and be able to go and have that immediate eligibility elsewhere. And it's interesting that he can even go within the conference as well if he chooses to do so. That was crazy that was announced because everybody just kind of thought Trevor Knight was the ultimate team player, but he's also the ultimate competitor, and he wants to have an opportunity to play somewhere. And then today it was announced that Trevor Knight has been demoted, if you will, to Oklahoma's third-string quarterback, and it's not something just because of the transfer announcement, but it was apparently that way against Oklahoma State in Oklahoma's final game of the season. Had something happened to Baker Mayfield in that game, it would have been Cody Thomas coming off the bench to play for Oklahoma instead of Trevor Knight. So that's an interesting thing going on with Oklahoma right now, the quarterback situation, and obviously you hope the best. You hope that you never want to go to a backup quarterback, but it looks like if Oklahoma was forced to do that, it would be Cody Thomas, the guy they go to over Trevor Knight.
Yes, Oklahoma fans do not want to see Cody Thomas or Trevor Knight
That's right.
on New Year's Eve. Baker Mayfield, coming off this Heisman Trophy presentation this past Saturday night, Matt, 35 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and considering the preseason expectations for Oklahoma were somewhat marginal for an elite program behind TCU and Baylor, and the spirit and the leadership that he provided that program, could you have seen him at the presentation there? I know it's tough to get into the top three in voting, but do you think he was a little bit slighted?
This has been a big topic, obviously, over the last week, and my answer to that question is no. I think they got it right. I think Derrick Henry. This was Derrick Henry's Heisman Trophy to lose, and it's been that way since last January, since the college football playoff. Really, I guess it was Christmas or New Year's Eve last year. That everyone was talking about Derrick Henry going into the season, and it was his, and he didn't do anything to lose it. And you look at Christian McCaffrey, over 400 yards in the Pac-12 championship game. What Deshaun Watson has done for the Clemson program to get them to the #1 ranking in the nation. I think it's okay. And here's what I think: the Heisman Trophy has turned into one of those things where it's no longer best based on the best single season performance. I think it's something that you begin to build up to now. And I think next year you go into the season and your front runners are going to be, in my opinion, Baker Mayfield and Christian McCaffrey. I think both of those guys right now going with McCaffrey going into the bowl game and Mayfield going into the playoff, I think both of those guys have already started working on their 2016 Heisman campaign. And the thing that maybe will benefit Baker Mayfield from this is the fact that there were so many media people, personalities that really expected him to be there, that he's going to have a lot of eyes on him going into this playoff. And if he leads Oklahoma to a national championship or gets them, to the championship game, if he has a good performance, there's going to be a lot of people looking at him and touting him going into next season, and that may not be a bad thing that he didn't get invited to New York City because he wasn't going to win it anyway.
See, someone on this show gave a very compelling reason for Christian McCaffrey to win the Heisman Trophy, and it's a pretty compelling case. But we'll stick in the Big 12 here. We'll kick it to Sean Cordy. I think one of the more attractive matchups, Sean, before we get to New Year's Eve, is this North Carolina-Baylor matchup. So disappointment possibly for Baylor if you look at the preseason expectations for North Carolina, maybe disappointment based on being 50 yards away from winning the ACC championship game. So are you expecting a shootout like the rest of us are?
No, not at all, because we have no idea what anyone's going to do with Baylor, because right now it looks like Stidham will not be coming back for Baylor. They're going to be running with Chris Johnson, the third-string quarterback, who no one knows what he can really do based off his first game as a starter against TCU in a complete rainstorm. No idea if he can actually play well. Next game against Texas, he struggled and then got injured right away. So Baylor, their last game isn't really indicative of what they can do. Based that they were playing with a wide receiver and running backs playing in a T formation. There's really no consistency with Baylor right now with their personnel. So they aren't going to be able to throw the ball downfield like UNC might be able to, and it's just going to be running the ball consistently, and eventually that's going to crack. If UNC can do their film and study that well enough, I don't see Baylor competing with a top 10 team right now.
Do we know what's happened to this line since this uncertainty of the quarterback situation?
The line has been perfectly fine with the running, and that's really all they've been doing. We can't see how well they've been doing in pass pro at all.
Sean, you know me better than that. I'm talking about the Vegas line.
All right. No, I don't know you better than that, but I should have figured that out. No, I have no idea. It's fluctuating because Stidham has been said to play, and sometimes he's been said not to. So I haven't been following the line at all.
We always talk motivation during these bowl games. Maybe the motivation could be heightened if the Baylor Bears coaching staff and administration would save those goodie bags until a victory. Outline these goodie bags for us for the Baylor Bears.
All right, so there's a $500 limit, and Baylor, they're supposed to get from the Russell Athletic Bowl a $350 Best Buy shopping trip, a pretty nice watch from Timely, and some flip-flops, and since they're going to Orlando, they get a beach towel and a athletic pullover. So
okay. It's not sounding like a whole bunch to me, but
no.
Hey.
But they get the $350 shopping trip.
It's appropriate to the trip to Florida, if nothing else.
But no, Texas Tech is getting the real sweet. They get a belt buckle, a duffel bag, and a alpaca.
Oh, man. That's real Texan. That's great.
Yeah,
I have no
and a
idea.
selfie stick.
Hey, belt
boy.
buckles go a long way in West Texas, though. I mean, that's one of their that's one of the forms of identification, I think.
I'm going to assume like every single person on our team already has a belt buckle, so we're just getting another belt buckle. We're having multiple. We can have closets full of belt buckles.
They're probably different sized belt buckles, though.
Fair.
Yeah, they come in all sorts of sizes there in Texas, as well as Matt pointed out.
But quickly, I just want to add, I think Kansas State gets the best. They get a Bass Pro Shop gift card and $200 binoculars.
Bass Pro Shop, that's in your estimation, John.
Bill Snyder's going to do so much bird watching with those binoculars. You know
Yeah,
he
will.
is. Oh, man.
Hunter, Texas Tech, they've had another week since the last time I talked to you to try to figure out how to stop Leonard Fournette. So the game is looming at this point. We're 2 weeks away, something like that. Any more hope than what you had last week?
I think I'm starting to get a little bit of hope. We can look at games like Texas and Kansas State where we were able to jump out ahead really quick and the other team couldn't really catch up. But then again, LSU is a completely and totally different animal than Texas and Kansas State. Like Leonard Fournette's a hoss. It's going to come down to whether we can get a couple turnovers and jump out to a quick lead. If we can't jump out to a quick lead, I don't think we win this game at all. If we're up by like 14-17 at halftime, I think we have a very, very solid chance. This team isn't really built to play from behind. Even though we have like a defense that emphasizes turnovers and an offense that slings the ball all over the place, our recent success has actually been with running the ball. We had the first team All Big 12 Associated Press running back with DeAndre Washington, who probably will break 1,500 yards in this game. The kid's the real freaking deal. And if we can get him loose and hopefully churn up a bit of clock, which I feel like I should be, flogging myself for saying that as a Tech fan, I really think we can get that win.
It must not be late enough in the dead period between the regular season and the postseason, because I haven't heard too much about suspensions. I haven't heard too many stupid comments out of anyone yet.
Yeah, everyone's keeping it really, really quiet. Apparently, a couple of our guys found a couple of tweets floating around where LSU players were like, "Why the heck are we even playing this game?" So, little social media motivation, but we'll see how far it goes, man.
And it's a good season for Texas Tech, even with the loss. You good with 7-6?
After 4-8, absolutely.
Matt, your thoughts about Oklahoma needing to complete the championship run, or should Sooner fans be happy with the way it stands right now?
Well, I mean, you get this far, you want to go the rest of the way. That's where it is, and for all four of those teams in the playoff, two of them are going to be disappointed on New Year's Eve, and then one of them is going to be disappointed a week later. So you want to complete the deal once you're there. But when you look at again, Oklahoma was in the Russell Athletic Bowl a year ago and just got demolished by Clemson, and that was really a low point for the Bob Stoops era. And to be able to come back and to be in the Final Four. 12 months later, it speaks well to where this program is. A lot of people didn't expect Oklahoma to be to this stage until the following year, and to be there after the 2015 season. It's been a successful season. You win the Big 12 championship. You win it outright. You have a Heisman-type quarterback in Baker Mayfield. Your defense seems to come back around to where they have been previously under the really good Oklahoma football teams. And so a worst-case scenario, you lose out in the Final Four, but you know you're heading in the right direction. So while there will be a lot of disappointment if Oklahoma drops the Orange Bowl, there's still going to be a lot of anticipation and excitement for next season. Either way, I mean, whether Oklahoma wins the national championship or whether they don't, there's going to be a ton of anticipation going into 2016.
Yeah, you talk about some serious redemption for Bob Stoops. Arrived in Norman with a big bang, just elevated the program to heights not seen since late 80s, late Barry Switzer,
85,
something in that range. 1985 national championship against Penn State at the Orange Bowl, if I remember correctly. And then
right.
Since then there've been some rough spots, and then he elevates the program very quickly, maintains it even though they lose some national championship games, and then kind of overrated in the preseason based on what the results were, and then he really bounces back. I think regardless of what we're so gold medal minded in America that if you don't finish number one, then forget it. But the credit has to go to what he's been able to do in the likes of a very strong conference. Sean,
yeah. I was just going to say you're absolutely right, because you look at the Big 12. I mean, it is unfortunate that Oklahoma State, TCU, Baylor all had quarterback issues, because I think it detracts a little bit from how good this conference actually was in football this year.
Hey, Sean, best bowl game outside of you wanting to see a Baylor, North Carolina, and the playoff game. We'll have to eliminate that. Is there a game that intrigues you?
Intriguing. I like to see the SEC going against to the Big 12. So you got Arkansas, Kansas State, and LSU, Texas Tech. And between those two, I'd have to say Tech and LSU, considering they're completely different mindsets. LSU's a run first, just pound the ball, and has a great defense. But then Texas Tech, you don't know what defense is going to show up, if they can get the turnover. And then you have Patrick Mahomes and DeAndre Washington, who can just run over the field all day. So it's just going to be a glacier against lightning bolts, and we'll see who wins.
Hunter, I'm guessing that most people want to see this TCU-Oregon game. If they've got no stake in any bowl game, this TCU-Oregon game could be a whole lot of fun.
I'm actually holding out for the Kansas-UCF bowl game. We'll call it the Toilet Bowl. We can have them play in the world's greatest slap fight. But, yeah, I honestly, if I'm picking a game that I'm going to watch above all others, besides my own teams, it's going to be TCU Oregon. Man, that's just going to be fun, man. There's going to be a lot of chrome. There's going to be a lot of running the ball. They're going to throw it all over the field. Probably not a lot of defense, but you never know. We'll see. Should be fun.
Yeah, I think if we're going to allow 5 and 7 teams to make bowl games, we might as well have a toilet bowl that precedes the national championship, maybe in Shreveport.
Why
and
not?
It would be a perfect setup with 0-12 versus 0-12 Kansas Central Florida this year. That'd be a perfect prelude into the national championship game. It'd be great. Great
Someone
TV.
has to win. Someone has to. That's the great part. It'd be so ridiculous.
Or not. Good tie.
I'd watch every second of that game. And
I
you
would
know
watch
you
it
would
too because it's got a title. If it's played in the middle of October, of course nobody watches it, but it's got a title. It's the entree before the, did I get that right? Before the national championship game. It's yeah.
Yeah, you got that right in French. Entree is an appetizer in French.
The appetizer.
It's compelling. It's high drama. It's it's like two replacement teams. it's like at the beginning of the replacements.
Yeah.
That team playing another team that's also exactly like the team from the beginning of the replacements. Oh gosh, it would be something, that's for sure.
Man, we digress. If you're breaking down Clemson, I don't know if you've had much prep time at this point because you still have a few weeks plus to look at the Clemson Tigers. What scares you? What concerns you? What maybe concerns you about your own team preparing for the Clemson Tigers?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to really jump into this a whole lot more starting next week. But I think the first thing when you look at Clemson is you got to start with quarterback Deshaun Watson. He's going to be a quarterback like Oklahoma hasn't seen this year, what he can do with his legs, what he can do with his arm. So you got to start there with containment with your defensive line. And then you look at what Clemson's defensive line can do. They've got some studs. They got some first-round NFL talent guys on there. And you know, whether Oklahoma's offensive line, have they improved to the point that we believe they have to be able to open up running lanes and to be able to establish a passing game to give Baker Mayfield time to step up in the pocket and to hit guys downfield. I think those are the two biggest matchups is both lines against each other. And you start there, and then you look at the quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield versus Deshaun Watson. It's going to be a fun game. And I think it's interesting when you look at the styles of the teams. You've got Oklahoma and Clemson playing each other. They're both the exact same style of team, pretty much mirror each other with the spread offense and so forth. And then you've got Alabama and Michigan State, who are pretty much the exact same type of team that mirror each other in the way they play. And it guarantees that in the championship game, regardless of who wins these semifinals, in the championship game, you're going to have a power run attack against a spread offense. And so it already makes it interesting for the championship game, regardless of how these semifinals go.
So, guys, before I let you go, I want to set you up all with one question. And for me, if you've talked to me about college football at any length of time, and you all three have, I love to compare the conferences. I don't believe that we have enough out-of-conference premier games in the first few weeks of the season to match up the conferences and really know who is the best conference, and it's difficult to compare the teams. Once we get to postseason, we finally get a little bit more of a sampling of conference versus conference. So in the Big 12, we've got 3 games against the SEC. We've got the Big 12 taking on the 2 best teams record-wise. Maybe Florida State would have an argument, but the 2 best record teams coming out of the ACC. And then we've got some other matchups with the Pac-12 in particular and taking on Oregon and Arizona State. So how much does this really matter? Does this matter to you in regards to bragging rights for the Big 12 in particular? Do you think it matters much? Should we put a lot of weight into this? And I'll start with you, Hunter.
Well, I think if everything was evenly matched, then it would carry a lot more weight than it does. And obviously you have some pretty good compelling matchups like TCU, Oregon, and Baylor, UNC. But then you have like Kansas State, Arkansas. And Arkansas has been playing like a buzzsaw recently. And Kansas State just, hasn't. And you have West Virginia, a very, very, I think, underrated team, going to face Arizona State, who I don't see as being that good. So if we pick off a win that we're supposed to win, is it really indicative of how good we are as a conference? All I'm trying to say is there's not a lot of like head-to-head matchups that could go either way. Like Texas Tech, we're expected to lose to LSU. And so if LSU wins that game, I don't think that makes the Big 12 look any worse necessarily. I mean, we're talking about a team that was in the hunt for the playoff at one point, a guy who almost had the Heisman, the October Heisman pretty much locked up. I don't know. I think it matters, and I would like to win. I would like every single Big 12 to win, a team to win their game. But I don't think it matters as much as we think it does.
But Hunter, if LSU is expected to be Texas Tech, and if LSU was, let's say, the second seed in the SEC and Texas Tech was like a 7 or 8 seed in the Big 12, then that's not a fair seeding. But we're looking at, I believe, a 3 and 5 team in the Big 12, correct? In Texas Tech?
I believe so.
Or 4 and 5. 4 and 5. I'm sorry, 4 and 5 in the Big 12, and we're looking at a 4 and 4 LSU team in the SEC. So the seeding matches up. It's very close. So it's to LSU and the SEC's credit in this particular matchup that they have a seemingly, we'll have to see the game being played, seemingly better team in a like-seeded game, if you follow me.
Yeah, and I'd say it's relatively pretty well seeded, but all the same, I still think there's just a massive talent disparity currently for LSU as opposed to Texas Tech. And we are a 7 and 5 team. We squeaked out a couple of really, really close wins over some teams that, frankly, are not really that good. I mean, we only beat Kansas by 10. We almost had a second-half comeback by Kansas State. But then again, we probably should have beaten TCU, had a real chance to put Oklahoma State away. I mean, is there a more the only football team that's more mercurial right now is the Texas Longhorns. It feels really, really weird saying that because normally they're really consistent, but not right now. I just don't know. I would have liked to play Texas A&M. I feel like that would have been a better matchup for monetary reasons and a better fan-based matchup. But LSU is a nice team to play, and hopefully we bring our A game and don't embarrass our conference too much.
Well, it's kind of hard to argue that the Pac-12 is probably the most balanced conference. I'm not going to say the best. I don't think we know who the best conference is, but it's the most balanced. If you go 1 through about 8 or 9, it's tough to separate those teams after Stanford probably. So, Matt, do you put a lot of weight on these games? Do you think it means a lot which conference comes out on top?
No, I really don't. I really, honestly, I think the only way it matters whether the Big 12 is in it or not, I think when you look at the playoff, that's what matters. When you look at the strength of a conference, that's where people are going to be talking about it. Because the reality is, 2 of the worst bowl matchups this season are LSU versus Texas Tech and Ole Miss versus Oklahoma State. I mean, I think Leonard Fournette could probably set a bowl record maybe by halftime against Texas Tech. I mean, all due respect, Texas Tech is the worst running defense around, and Leonard Fournette could legitimately be the best running back in college football. And so I agree with what you're saying when you look at seeding compared to conference. But I agree with what Hunter's saying. There's just such a talent disparity there in some of those games that it's really going to if Texas Tech somehow beats LSU, that looks great for the Big 12 and it looks bad for the SEC. You flip that though, and you put some of these other schools out there, and if Arizona State beats West Virginia, that looks great for the Pac-12. It looks bad for the Big 12. I don't know that there's a lot of stock you can put in the bowl records for the conferences, and I really don't. I cheer typically, unless they're the words Longhorns are somewhere on the jersey. I cheer for all the Big 12 schools when it comes this time of the year, but I don't expect a lot from the conference this year in terms of a bowl record, just because some of the matchups are just really, in my opinion, egregious towards the strengths of the opponents and not really the strengths of the Big 12. And those 2 games that I mentioned specifically, I think could be really, really train wrecks of games for the Big 12.
Okay, so you think they're bad matchups for the Big 12, but they're not bad matchups in regards to the seedings of the 2 teams. Ole Miss and Oklahoma State should play.
No, I think they should, but what I'm saying is in both of those instances, look at Ole Miss versus Oklahoma State. Where is Oklahoma State's primary weakness? Well, it's against a mobile quarterback with athletic receivers. I mean, look what Baker Mayfield did. Look what Baylor's third-string guy did against Oklahoma State. And that's just a really bad matchup for the Cowboys. And the same thing for Texas Tech against LSU. What is their primary weakness? Well, it's against the run, defending the run. And what is LSU's primary strength? It's the running game. And so those are just really, really bad matchups for the conference, not seeding-wise. I mean, they're where they're supposed to be to earn that spot. But when you look at the way those teams, those bowl games are matched up, with all due respect, I will be cheering for Texas Tech. I'll be cheering for Oklahoma State. But both of those programs are going to need a miracle to come out with a win.
I just think it's unfortunate because right now we have one game between the Big 12 and the SEC, and that's Oklahoma-Tennessee, which was a really good game on the road for Oklahoma, but it turned out to be the best team in the Big 12 against the.
Well, you had Texas Tech beat Arkansas.
Oh
I
yeah,
was about to
I'm
say,
sorry. You're right, Texas. I'm sorry, Hunter. I'm sorry. I didn't
On the
forget
road,
that. We
too.
talked about it last week. You're right. You're
They're
right.
both on the road.
Oh, hang on. You're right. Texas Tech pulled off the win against Arkansas, and that's a pretty light-seeded game. But you also had the Oklahoma game, so kudos to the Big 12, 2-0 against the SEC this season, the Oklahoma-Tennessee matchup. And I think the Vols are a very capable, sound team. I know people discounted that win for Oklahoma. A lot of people did after Tennessee lost a few games, but that's a very good football team, very talented team. So that's a quality win, but it's still the best team in the Big 12 against like the 6th or 7th best team in the Big 10 or in the SEC. Sean, your thoughts about, I think it gives us some indication. I don't think it should be taken as gospel truth that just because the SEC, if this happens, wins 3 games over the Big 12, it's a better conference. But it's all we have, and it's some indication like seeded teams playing.
Yeah, I think that it shouldn't matter as much as it probably does to the public for the most part. But to see 3 matchups with the SEC, if the Big 12 can sweep the table and go 5-0 against the SEC, that should say something that at least the top tier teams of the conference are better than the SEC. But then you're always going to have the pundits that say that, oh, they have Iowa State and Kansas, so they're automatically worse than everyone else with 10 teams as well. So because we have the teams that don't play, specifically Kansas, there's always going to be a thought or an excuse that the Big 12 is just a fake conference with high-flying offenses that can't always match up to the SEC or Pac-12, Big 10, what have you. So it gives us a limited scale of the upper echelon teams. So it matters to some extent, but since you don't have everyone going in a bracket, it's just not the same.
I tend to discount Kansas to the Big 12's credit, just in the same way that I discount Purdue or Oregon
Vanderbilt.
State or fill in the blank Vanderbilt, because everybody's got one. If you had 3 of them, that would be another deal.
And that's what Big 12 fans always say to SEC fans. Like, you guys have Vanderbilt. You guys had Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky's a little bit better than they used to be, but there's always
South Carolina. Everybody's got TCU. I mean, everybody's got Iowa State and Kansas. I mean, the reality is everybody has it. It's just some stick out like a sore thumb and some you can hide.
Yeah,
and
it's just not basketball where it's where you can play enough games to get those matchups in the preseason before the conference season and really let teams go at it.
Yeah.
The only thing I will say is that if Oklahoma hadn't made the playoff, I would be singing a completely different tune. Like, I'm operating off of like the assumption that the Big 12 is already getting a little bit of respect. If I didn't think we were getting a little bit of respect, I would take those bowl matchups a lot more seriously and use them as say like, hey, this is a reason why we should have been in the playoff. But I think that the playoff committee really saw their mistake last year with TCU when they just trounced Ole Miss. Mm-hmm. And I think it was the Peach Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And man, that team got snubbed, and they probably should have been in the playoff. But I don't know, that now that respect seemingly is there, all these like bowl matchups and conference on conference stuff, it really doesn't seem like as big of a deal. It's a little bit different when there's 4 teams playing for the national championship as opposed to 2. There's a lot less avenues for disrespect.
Okay. Enjoy the conversation. I can talk about conference versus conference all night long, and after the season I will definitely be breaking down all the Power 5 games, matchups between individual conferences, because I think that tells us a lot. There's still not enough of a sample size, but I think it tells us a lot. For example, last year the Pac-12 went like 13-6 against the other 4 conferences, and then when you break down the seedings, because obviously you have to take into consideration if a first-place team beats a 10th-place team, well, that can't be given as much weight as a like-seeded matchup. So I enjoy the breakdown. I enjoy looking at the conference setup. Not enough games, but that's what we've got to work with right now.
We should add that the Big 12 recently passed a law, if you would say, that they have to play a Power 5 or Notre Dame. And Baylor's already making calls to start changing up their schedule, and people are hoping they break contracts. So we might see Baylor start playing some tougher teams.
Sean, as soon as I heard that the other day, I immediately thought of you, and I looked at Baylor's future schedules to see, man, they've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, they do. They got to pay a lot of money if they're going to pay off these FCS schools, yeah.
All right, guys, this has been Big 12 Breakdown. We come your way every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 8 o'clock Central. Matt Hofeld from Crimson and Cream Machine, Hunter Cook from Viva the Matador, and also Sean Cordy from Today's You. Guys, I enjoyed it as always. Talk to you later.
Take care. Thanks, guys.
See you.